Hi everyone, I'm Alex Rosenfeld, founder of Freshwater Investments, and this is Coffee with the T-Bird podcast. I sit down with fellow T-Birds who are making an impact in business, leadership, and entrepreneurship. Each episode features conversations that explore the pivotal moments, personal motivations, and lessons learned on their journeys. Whether you're a student, alum, or someone passionate about business and personal growth, you'll walk away with fresh ideas. This is a bit more than a podcast. It's a platform for connections, storytelling, and celebrating the global spirit of Thunderbird. This podcast is sponsored by Freshwater Investments. At Freshwater, we make it simple for you to invest in large apartment communities across the United States so you can earn passive income, grow your capital, and benefit from real estate tax breaks without owning or managing property yourself. Andreas, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me. Very exciting to be here.
Where do I find you today?
You find me just at Lake Geneva, Switzerland. Evening for me, morning for you.
Excellent. So, Andreas, thank you for taking time. I looked at your LinkedIn profile and I read that you're writing a book and you're going to publish it soon. Can we start our conversation with your book?
Well, you can start reading. What I do is I have a couple of books earmarked on my to-do list. I'll give you a little bit of a sneak preview. I've spent almost 3 decades working in big corporations, and I thought in the Thunderbird spirit of sharing kind of pain and best practices of what I went through, I have one book earmarked, Swimming in Corporate Peanut Butter. So that is one idea I have, and I have many, many chapters kind of drafted on that. But the other one that is higher up on the list right now, it's kind of the second chapter of the Swimming in Peanut Butter. It's called Swimming with Sharks from the World of Formula One. And I've spent 4 years in that circus of Formula One as a partner, as a sponsor. I'm not sure how much you follow that in the US. It's pretty hot right now. There's a movie out with Brad Pitt. There is a Netflix show called Drive to Survive. So there's more interest in the sports. But really what I try to do is find leadership lessons in worlds outside of, in this case, Formula One, and bring it back and see what we can learn from it. I started kind of testing the waters in some LinkedIn articles that you can see. And then I thought, wait a minute, once you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different chapters, you could very easily make a book out of it. So that is the idea. Early stages, but a bit of a side project. Yeah.
Excellent. So how close that F1 movie is to real life in the workings of F1?
If you know your stuff from a pure, I would say, technical point of view, it is pretty close. If you look at the production value, I think they put in like $300 million of making it really, really real. Setting up the 11th team on the grid and getting the FIA authorization to be next to the real drivers and everything else. But I also don't think that's the point. I don't think the point is to be 1-to-1 100% correct. There's some topics, but it is Hollywood. It is a story, but the way it's done, I think it's interesting. And I just thought I use that momentum to kind of leverage that wave for my own story, but not criticizing every little technicality. Mm-hmm. That is not what I don't think that's the point of the movie. What I try to find is, again, those leadership lessons that are in there and how we can translate that as business people into our little world.
Excellent. How are you going to publish your book? Do you work with an agent, publishing house, or you self-publish it?
Yes, all good questions. I've done different type of brand books and other things in my previous lives, but not a personal project like this. I've even thought about maybe partnering up with Thunderbird. So any one of the listeners or T-Bird friends in here that have ideas and connections, let me know.
Excellent. Well, good luck with your book, and
thank you.
Let me take you to the beginning of your life, of your journey. Let's talk about where you grew up, what was like growing up in Switzerland, and maybe share something about your family.
Sure.
Let's go there.
Sure. Well, I am living and residing here in Switzerland. I am also now a Swiss citizen, but first and foremost also a German citizen. So I grew up in Germany, actually. One of the things that brought me outside kind of like the borders of kind of like my own bubble was sports. So I played a lot of sports. This is also back in the 80s. I was very active in martial arts. I played jiu-jitsu and aikido, and there was an exchange program with the Olympic sports movement between bringing athletes from Germany to Japan and vice versa. And for me, in today's world, that would be like traveling to the moon. It was a very big thing going to Japan. So I applied to be part of that delegation. And then I was sent to Japan. And this is when Japan was still very hot. It's almost like whatever China would be today. And if you recall, there was just a lot going on from a business point of view. It was not as mainstream as it is now on TikTok and Instagram. It was very much kind of a mysterious place. And when I came back from that exchange, I was totally into Japanese culture and
how old you were then?
I was kind of like early 20s.
Okay.
But it changed so much that I told my parents, I don't really know where this is going, but I want to do something with Japan. And they thought, now he's really crazy. But if that's what he wants to do, they understood that Japan was hot. So I did go and study Japanese studies first in Germany, where I think you get a pretty good foundation of kind of like understanding kind of the language and reading and writing skills for a base level. But the goal was always to go and to be there and to study there. And then I kind of made the step. I moved to Keio University in Tokyo and studied there. And you can imagine it's today expensive. It was really expensive back then. And I found a job in a small consulting firm where I worked at night and financing my life, financing kind of the studies. And I had a hard-ass boss, German lawyer, who did not really spend any time with me. He was just billing by the minute. Mm-hmm. And suddenly one night he actually talked to me and said, "Oh, Mr. Sigl, what do you want to do after this is over?" And I thought, wow, first he knows my name, second cares about what I'm doing here. And remember, Alex, this is pre-Google, pre-internet. You couldn't just search stuff. So I said, I'm not really sure. I have those classmates at Keio that told me about this business school called Thunderbird. And the moment he heard that, he said, wait a minute. He took off his shoes, stepped on his office chair and found a binder high up on the shelf because his business was kind of networking connections. He was the chairperson of the European Chamber of Commerce. So any business coming into Japan or out would have to go through him. And he said, Thunderbird, talk to this person. He gave me a Japanese Meishi business card. He said, talk to that person. He's the director of the Tokyo campus. This is when we still had a campus in Japan, a campus in Geneva and so forth. And you and I wouldn't sit here today if that didn't happen. If he didn't take off his shoes, get on the chair, take the business card. And by the way, I'm looking at my inbox here. He sent me a note yesterday. That's more than 30 years ago. And I told him, I said, if you didn't do that, I wouldn't be here today. And
that's great.
And then he said, now you can call me Reinhard. So now we are first name. It took us 30 years, German culture, to like move from a kind of like last name basis to first name. But yeah, that's how it happened.
That's great. I have a few follow-up questions,
Sure.
if you don't mind. What happened in Japan when you just arrived there first time? Why you were so impressed that it kind of changed your whole life trajectory afterwards?
I've been there now many, many times, but first time we were so tired and you still didn't want to close your eyes. It was just like so much new information and everything was so different. Still is today, but today you find out in other ways. There you had to experience it, right? For us, you turn the doorknob this way. There you turn it the other way. For us, you go whatever. You go in the bath. There you clean before you go in the bath. I mean, everything was just reverse and crazy. And at the same time, so fascinating that that I wanted to just understand more and get more into it. And also the first time around, I didn't really understand much. We had kind of a almost like little pointing dictionary where you could say, whatever, I want to have this, I don't want to have this.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I studied the language, obviously, then suddenly you can communicate, including I had a host family where I would stay at the house. And suddenly, by the way, also I went 30 years later with my family to the same host father that was now the host grandfather and their children. And so you get deeper into it. Obviously, you never fully get it. But that was really, it was just so fascinating to kind of peel that onion and learn more and more, and also be a little bit different, because you would have other friends that speak other languages or have been to other places, but not that many that speak Japanese or have been there.
Yeah. Any interesting cultural differences did you experience when you lived with the host family?
Yeah, of course, so many. If you remember Karate Kid in the movies, it was a little bit like Mr. Miyagi, kind of like real countryside, not Tokyo. This is in a place called Shikoku, one of the kind of more countryside areas. I really believe I was one of the few gaijin foreigners, white guys, who's been to that small little village, and it made you feel very special. So we had all kind of official appointments and kind of like sport programs and stuff. TV was there, newspapers, and everyone wanted to shake your hand. So you felt really, really special about just being there, and everyone wanted to take a picture. And at the same time, you wanted to understand more of what's going on. And then suddenly you come to Tokyo, where you're just one out of a million people, and it's not that special. But still, I can tell you, even years later, my youngest is born in Tokyo, walking with a blonde boy through Tokyo. Even today, still gets you a lot of attention.
That's great. So let's keep going. You heard about Thunderbird. You got interested in what's next?
So yes, I had those kind of three options. I was in Japan. And then the question was, okay, what do I do? Do I either stay or go back to Germany or move further to the US? Because I heard about Thunderbird. And so I kind of took my chips basically from the table, that the little money that I earned. And I said, okay, I need to go and check it out. I flew to Phoenix, Arizona and checked out the school and made contact there and thought, okay, this could be really interesting, and went for that kind of like next step and started in Winterim in E4.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
that's how it started. Big shout out to Dean Brian Bates, who was the Dean of Admissions back there. He met me. I didn't come from a business background, and he said, okay, we'll bring you in kind of on probation, because you need to kind of like earn your way into the school, and I think hopefully no regrets. But then I came in, and looking back now, so many years later, it really offered so much more than whatever was in the catalog, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I'm sure we're going to talk about today.
Excellent. And can you talk about your experience at Thunderbird while you're studying? What things you were involved in and so forth?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this was, I would say, compared to where the school is today, we were still obviously in Glendale, the kind of original campus, but things already have changed. So it was, I would say, halfway modern compared to the early days. But I think if you look at the landscape around, it was still a bit of countryside. Today, I think if you go to the same place, you have big intersections and shopping malls and gas stations. There, once you left the freeway and you moved west, then at some point it felt a little bit like kind of farmland. But then once you were, it was almost like an island once you were on campus, and you had both kind of the historical buildings with hangars and tower and so forth, but also some new facilities already, which for me was outstanding when I came from studying in Tokyo, for instance. I mean, a big famous university like Keio, but not as fancy set up the way we had it. So in terms of the facility, but also very quickly, I think you made friends just because you're all on this little island in the desert. And my focus was just to really, I remember we had a kickoff with the different faculty and professors. And one of the professors, basically he said, it's here for you to take. No one will give it to you or bring it after you or whatever. It's really you take out as much as you can. And for me, that was kind of my mantra. In the time I was there, I just wanted to take as much of opportunity and connections and knowledge with me.
Excellent. Thank you. So what are your favorite memories about that time?
I mean, definitely I can tell you even right now, some of the friends are either roommates that later I became his best man at his wedding or things that paid out 10, 20, 30 years later that you wouldn't believe. So one of the memories was we had in winter, and we had a different speaker, kind of a practitioner out of business every day. And one of the speakers came from Intel Corporation. And you have them do their talk. And then later he said, okay, I want to talk to you, and you. And he asked me to come down and speak to him. And later it turned out that, he was from the Arizona facilities of Intel, but he had connections to the EMEA European office in Munich. And he said, if you're interested in Intel, you might want to talk to person A and B, which he did. And he introduced me. And guess what? Again, I wouldn't sit here today because out of that winter class came the introduction, came my first job at Intel in Europe. And then a couple of years later, then I said, okay, I want to go back to the mothership. And I went your way to California, to Santa Clara. Mm-hmm. So little things that at that moment you don't know or appreciate that much that totally change your life.
Yeah, totally changes the trajectory. Excellent. Yes. So let's talk about your career. You had so many interesting jobs. What was the focus of these jobs? And just walk me through that history.
Yeah, sure. So again, in school, I was focused very much on marketing and technology. I thought those are two hot areas that I'm interested in. I also had an internship during my Thunderbird days, just down the street at Infiniti, which gave me a little bit of insight into the sector. With this, like I said, I went to work for Intel, which back then with Intel Inside and kind of, if you want to say first generation of the internet was pretty hot. And I realized also I was in a European headquarters, but the real action happened in the mothership. It happened in Santa Clara, and it was not only very engineering focused, it was also very American by design. So they made global marketing, global advertising, but really very US centric. And they realized to be more relevant globally, we need to mix things up a bit. And I said, okay, I volunteer, and then came to live in San Francisco, commuted down. We did our thing in Santa Clara, but at the same time, this was also that internet bubble 1.0. And while that was happening, you could feel both excitement, but you could also see a lot of hot air that might be imploding very soon. And I had one of my other Thunderbird friends who was at that before my roommate working at Audi as in the car company. And he wanted to recruit me over to come to Michigan, Detroit. And I said, Jim, are you crazy?
It's very, very challenging.
Why would I want to leave San Francisco, one of the coolest places, and the Silicon Valley to go what people call flyover country and go to Michigan? And then a year later, he came again, and he handed me the key to an Audi TT Roadster, and he said, "Happy birthday! Why don't you try our product for 1 week?" And so I did. And he was very smart because then I said, maybe that kind of automotive stuff is actually cooler than this kind of imploding internet bubble. And again, I kind of threw away my return ticket as an expat to go back to Intel in Europe again and moved to Michigan, which again, I think it was one of those forks in the road that looking back was interesting because then that got me both into premium luxury and automotive and ultimately got me back again to Japan. So we worked in kind of like the forefront of digital before digital was cool. We were more like the geeks in automotive marketing. And then after 5+ years there, suddenly I got headhunted back to Japan, where they said, like, wait a minute, we need someone who understands premium and automotive, and that was one of the Japanese brands. So you had Toyota with Lexus, you had Nissan with Infiniti at that moment, and they wanted to take Infiniti global. And I said, okay, happy to go back. So I moved back for my wife. It was the first time going. And we had a little one who was born in Michigan at that time. So we packed up, moved to Tokyo, and then I got into Nissan and Infiniti.
Excellent. And so your wife were okay to move countries with a little baby?
If you ask her now, yes. If you ask her back then, it was a very big step. But also it was one of the best times we had once we made that step. And by the way, our second son is born in Tokyo. So we kind of like added souvenirs along the journey. But yes, we moved together to Japan, and we had a great time. On one side, if you remember, you had those American brands that were born in the US, like Lexus, like Infiniti, and then needed to globalize. But there was really nothing there in terms of setup to do this out of a Japanese headquarters. So it really felt a bit like a startup entrepreneur role, where you
what it takes to globalize a brand like Infiniti, like Lexus.
Yeah, I mean, on one side, of course, it always takes product, and it takes global product or market specific product, if you think about it, because the product that would fit in the US or Canada doesn't always make sense in in China, Russia, Europe, where we kind of roll it out. And being a marketing guy, also it takes investment in the brand, because you're moving into a premium luxury space. And at that moment, the Japanese manufacturers, they love the profit, but not necessarily the investment it takes upfront and the time, right? Because the other competitor, the Mercedes, the Audi, BMW, or brands, they were maybe like 100 years ahead in terms of investing in the product, in the brand, and kind of teaching customers what to expect. So a lot of education, a lot of alliances, if you want, with your markets and with your colleagues, because you couldn't just get that out of the Japanese colleagues, where, by the way, a lot of the product there was sold under the Nissan brand. So if you talk about Infiniti, they didn't even know it because it didn't exist in front of their homes. So exciting times, a lot of capability building, a lot of kind of education. For me, this was nice because kind of the circle closed, where I would use some of my Japanese, not just the language, but also the kind of what I call my 5 to 9 Japanese. So the after hours Japanese, where you socialize and connect. And then at some point came the opportunity where we said, okay, now we need to build an European EMEA, Europe, Middle East, Africa office, and we need to place that somewhere. And out of all places, we chose to place that near Geneva here in Switzerland. And then I said, okay, I volunteer for that challenge, because again, that hasn't been done. And at the same time, again, it was like a little bit like a startup, where you would come and you have some kind of global support and product and financing, but at the same time, you're starting from scratch. The lines then.
How did you decide to approach differentiating Infiniti brand in Europe and competing with Mercedes and Porsches?
Yeah, good question, because no one was waiting for luxury from Japan in automotive space. Still today, I would say it's a tough proposition. You would need to look into we wanted to be both in performance and premium. And then if you look at what makes Japan different, if you've ever been, or if someone has been, there's wow, amazing service, amazing hospitality. There's a concept in Japanese called omotenashi, which means kind of being one step ahead in terms of anticipatory hospitality. I know Alex is coming. He likes to drink tea, not coffee. So I already prepare in advance. So there's a lot of kind of soft elements, if you want, beyond the product. So we thought there needs to be this. But at the end of the day, you still need the product. You need investors. You need dealers and franchise partners to invest. So a lot of those things came together. And like I said earlier, also the product mix in itself was made for other markets, big CO2, big kind of fuel consumption handicaps that we had. So we needed to invest in the brand, and all of that on top of the financial crisis. I've given talks to executive program students from Thunderbird in the middle of that time that I called How to Launch a Premium Brand in Tough Financial Times, because it was not only for the where all of the investors would get cold feet. And then we had leadership change in Japan, and there was one gentleman who was very brave at that moment and said, okay, we got to do something different, because he understood we have to invest in the brand, both for the end customer, but also for the investors. And he asked around in a big conference room, 22nd floor in Yokohama, all of the regions, all of the markets. And he said, what do you guys want? Tell me what you need, and we'll bring it to the boss, who at that time was Carlos Ghosn, who you've maybe seen on Netflix.
I've heard about that guy.
And of course, every market, every region had a different idea. And he said, you tell that to Andreas and we'll put it together. And I said, Andy, are you crazy? No one will agree on one thing. And he said, that's perfect, because then we can do what we want. So what that became was then where I said, okay, if we want to be both premium and performance, we need to have a global platform like Formula One. And so we said, okay, we need to partner with someone to get into Formula One, because it's an expensive ticket. And we were part of the Renault Alliance. So we had kind of a powertrain, an engine, and we partnered with Red Bull, and we came in at the right time. And then that proposal suddenly became my full-time job to run that program and activate it. And I did this technically out of here, but in reality, you're just on the road. You're every weekend somewhere. And we were lucky on top where we became 4 times world champions. And so coming back to your book question, that was that time where I learned a lot of my lessons.
You learned inside the Formula One at that time.
Yes. I learned a lot, including some of the listeners will remember Professor Ram. He was our marketing guru, professor back in the day. And at some point, he was in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi at the Grand Prix, happened to be there with Thunderbird. And I got contacted to say if there's a chance to get him into the race, into the paddock. And so I showed him kind of like what we did in kind of activation and marketing in a luxury space. And suddenly it was funny because the tables have turned. So suddenly now I was the teacher and he was the student.
Oh, that's great. So let's talk about one of those leadership lessons. Any lesson you can recall that made a really strong impression on you?
Yes, many. If I think one of the good ones, I said the brand Infiniti was born in the US. Therefore, most of the money, most of the revenue and everything came from that market. But also no one cared at that moment so much about the sport. So the moment when we proposed, good news, we're going into F1, I was one of the most hated guys in at Nissan Infiniti USA, because they said he's taking our money to grow China, right? Or to grow Europe. And I think the lesson there was you need to bring the others around and don't make it personal. It was not me against them. We needed to make sure their stakeholders kind of supported also. So we overinvested. We brought Sebastian Vettel back to the late night show in New York. We brought dealers and their media partners and journalists into whatever, Monaco Grand Prix and other places, that they told them the story to say, this is a good thing, and not me. And then ultimately, now suddenly we have 3 Grand Prix. We have one in Austin. We have one in Las Vegas. We have one in Miami. So things have changed,
and it's big now. Yes.
Early on, it was tough, and I think those lessons you look back later and say like, okay, yes, you need to come like bring those partners along.
Okay. I've seen some other big names on your LinkedIn profile, like Olympic Committee and Champions League.
Yeah, I can make that jump. So what happened also is, I've spent 10 years at Nissan. We spent I was lucky to kind of manage through 4 world championships. And people get spoiled because they think it's just normal that you win and you become world champion. And they also think this is so sexy where everybody wants to have their fingers in the pie. They don't appreciate the work or the effort.
Mm-hmm.
And you start justifying it, but at some point, you also know it's time to move on. And while I was still in Formula One, I got contacted by the IOC, by the International Olympic Committee, that happens to sit here in Lausanne, in Switzerland, where they lost a little bit, I would say, of the glamour. And if you look back, and then they saw Red Bull and the things we've done there with F1, they said that we need a little bit of that pixie dust from Red Bull to freshen up the games. And I said, okay, actually, I've always been fascinated by the Olympics. And if they cannot have me kind of like in the team, then I'd be happy to consult. And basically, I became a full-time strategic advisor to the games. And this is before Rio 2016, where they were selling TV rights until 2032. They didn't even know what the product would be like. So I helped them to say, like, wait a minute, we need to kind of get a new perspective on what is the product, what are we actually selling. And I'm still grateful for that. Great times, great memories, still a lot of friends there. And you've seen things changing there, both for the Youth Olympic Games and for the Summer and Winter Games.
Yes, and the last Olympic Games were a good example of very high interest. Like in the US, a lot of interest for the games, and very good marketing and very good show. So it's been I think it's great.
Yeah, but it took some time and some painful experiences.
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up back in former Soviet Union, I think that was the greatest TV event that I was watching on TV. It was like the best thing ever to watch the Olympic Games. And I guess it's back to the same hype and same level of interest over here in States. So which is great.
It's coming to LA in the next summer
year,
games.
Yeah. Everybody's excited in a way. And Champions League, the
also we had
football.
So in our Nissan portfolio, so I talked about Infiniti and F1, but also Nissan as a more kind of volume-driven brand needed a platform to just talk to a lot of people. And at that moment, the UEFA Champions League sponsor slot for an automotive partner became free. So I've spent some time also activating on that side with Nissan and UEFA Champions League, which again, if you look at football or soccer, one of the biggest connectors, both B2C and B2B, that you can do if you activate it right. And I think we've done some good stuff there.
So if you can talk about numbers, I'm curious, how much do you need to pay to Champions League to be a sponsor, to be an automotive sponsor?
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't have to be exact, but just maybe a range.
I had the same questions. You can imagine every weekend I was facing the media in F1, and everyone wanted to know, how much did you pay, right? And I always had 2 answers. One is, you are not feeding me or pouring me enough wine that I would just tell you the number. And then even if you knew, it wouldn't mean much, because usually you would spend that money anyway, but you would spend it on other stuff, right? So before, we would have one managing director likes horse riding because his daughter has a pony or something, and they spent the money here, and the other one are with Cirque du Soleil and spend it here. And now suddenly we bundle it together, which you could argue sometimes maybe even makes it more effective, and you're saving because you're focused on one platform. But more importantly, it's not really the rights. So if you say you spend X million for the sponsorship rights, if it's Champions League or Olympics or F1, you need to always double it to activate it. Because the rights is just like, Alex, you would say, I'm buying the rights for a gold mine. Unless you put money into the excavator and digging the gold out, you just have the rights. You're not doing anything. And we realized that early on by saying, if we spend 10, we need to spend another 10. If we spend 20, we need to spend another 20. And more importantly, even for me, with the regions and the markets and the dealers, until they put in their own money and have skin in the game, then it's just me globally kind of paying for everybody. If it's free, there is no value. So for me, that was the biggest lesson along the way, that first, you always have to double. I mean, it seems very simplistic. And then second, you buy a list of, let's say, 100 rights on different things. You can put your logo here. You can bring so many guests there. So, but at the end of the year, if you didn't use it, you also left money on the table. And at the end of the whole season, if you were, whatever, the VP of North America, and you wouldn't say, let's do it again next year, then I lost, right? So I would need all the others to say, this was so good, even put in our own money again. And that was really the point. So the numbers, I can tell you, everything now has become much more expensive because also the platform delivers more. So if you look at Formula One, if you want to buy a team, it'll cost you at least $1 billion to just get a team. And there's only 10, right?
Yeah.
They have a budget somewhere between 300 and 400 million a year to run it. And if you become a title partner like we did, maybe you got it back for whatever, 20 million. Now you need to pay 3-4 times the amount of that. So yes, it's a lot, but it's always the opportunity cost because you would spend it anyway. You would spend it on TV, on print, on digital marketing or somewhere. It's just what it gets you and how focused it is and how much it is on message.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Did you get a chance to go to a Champions League final and watch the game live?
I've been to games. I've been even later on in my other jobs, but not so much on the football side because I spend so much time in F1. You are every weekend in a different continent and somewhere. And even there, of course, again, it sounds glamorous, but it's
still on the road.
And
you're still on the road. Yeah.
You're constantly in a traveling circus. There's always a price to pay.
Got it. So what's today? What's your role today? You running a business?
So yeah,
you consulting?
So after all of this, I had another couple of interesting roles. I then worked for Philip Morris International as a non-smoker that kind of like felt weird by saying, why is he now in the business of tobacco? But what's interesting is that Philip Morris suddenly decided to kind of like move away from combustible cigarettes into what is called heated tobacco, and launch a brand called IQOS that is not good for you, but better for you. That's as much as the kind of like sales pitch I'm going to get into. But it was so interesting as a true business transformation that they needed people from consumer marketing and that have been in other places in digital marketing to kind of like help find partners to tell a better story. Because historically it was a very negative story, and now suddenly it's better. It's not good for you, but it's better for you. But you need others to help tell that story. So I joined Philip Morris for a couple of years on convincing media owners and other partners to say like, okay, unless you're supporting this, you're really prohibiting people to find out more. And my latest role then was I moved from the tobacco business into the wine and spirits business with Stoli Group. I don't know if you grew up in the Soviet Union, you remember Stolichnaya.
Yeah, of
vodka,
course.
Now called Stoli, now no longer connection to the Soviet Union, but it's made in Riga. But we also had other categories from agave, as in tequila or mezcal, to whiskey, to wine and so forth. So I managed as a group CMO the whole portfolio. And yeah, so now suddenly, if I look back, I have all of those experiences and tools in my toolbox. So my next thing is now a bit of a timeout and say, okay, what is next? Should I go into teaching, consulting, or maybe if the right thing comes around, one more role for a big global corporation, because that's what I've done for 3 decades.
That's great. With your amazing background in branding and marketing, let's talk about marketing future with an introduction of AI and its impact on marketing and branding. What do you think we can expect in the next few years?
Big question. Earlier, I talked about that kind of like first internet bubble. In my days at Intel, for instance, it was still pretty much analog, focus on TV, on print, on radio. Then everyone talked about that kind of like next phase, including what happened on social media and classic digital marketing that you have today. But really, it just follows usually eyeballs and media consumption and media behavior. So the whole idea is understanding where you spend your time and trying to get in front of you, right? So if you are reading the newspaper or watching TV, then we would try to get in front of you through those channels. Now, everybody is on their phone, especially younger, but not just younger generations, pretty much everybody, or double screening or triple screening at night. So then the marketing dollars and advertising dollars follow media consumption. And then the next thing is going to be, where do you go? And when I talked about sponsorships or kind of like live sports, for instance, those are the very few precious moments where you're not looking through glass, right? You're not looking at a screen. You're looking at a live event or something. And maybe before and after you will look at a screen and you will share stuff. So I think that will suddenly, and already has gotten a bit of a renaissance where those live moments become more precious. If you look at music, my son is a music producer. He's a musician. They're not making money with streaming. Even for the big stars, is on concerts and live. So same kind of thing that comes back. And I think those few moments that we're not looking like now on a piece of glass, they will become more valuable and people will pay extra to get that little attention that you have. Then, of course, the big elephant on the table right now is AI. So both in terms of content creation and kind of like media placement, it's exciting as a marketeer to see what's possible. And as a private person and consumer, it's pretty scary to see what's possible, right? I mean, you can do amazing content, maybe not for free, but very fast and at a decent quality, and it's exponentially growing. Back in the day, I remember we would be sitting behind focus group mirrors and we would do A and B testing and all kind of stuff that takes weeks and months and a lot of money. Now you can test creative together with AI in an instant, 1,000 variations. You can change your A to B to C variations within splits of a second. So all of that is already changing. And I think it will change. Difficult to see where it's going, but you can imagine how much money there is going right now. All of the agencies, everybody now they're not asking if AI, there's only a question how they embrace it. Because if you don't, you're out.
Yeah. So a bit of a selfish question. My daughter is starting a university this fall, and she's going to learn marketing. She's going to major in marketing. What advice would you have for kids in college right now that learning marketing, that want to be in branding and marketing after they graduate, given what's going on in the industry right now? How should they approach learning about the industry that is changing so rapidly?
Yes. And it's all industries, right? I mean, if you were a lawyer,
everything's changing.
Or doctor, I mean, it'll be very difficult to give advice. So I think the first thing would be both as a parent and as a teacher to really embrace the tool. I mean, don't just become either a naysayer and say it's going to go away, or if you become a total fan, I think you need to have some respect also. But the teachers and professors, they should definitely embrace it and say, instead of fighting it, they need to learn how to work with it. I think that's for sure. Same, my youngest right now, he's going to a hospitality business school, and it's the same thing. I think you still need to differentiate yourself, either experiences or things that cannot easily be replaced. So if it's just whatever, data analysis or media buying or whatever, it's going to be done so much better already today. So you need to stay one step ahead of it and understand what's going on. I think it's really white collar, whatever type of work across the board. difficult to predict unless you start learning to work with it and stay ahead of it. And I think the human touch, if this is in a really nice restaurant or at a live event or something, will be the last thing to be replaced. Whereas I think that could be there. If it's anything that could be easily done by saying, like, wait a minute, someone else could write that copy faster, make a sketch faster, whatever. And the relationship and the human touch part, I think, is something both at school and in your life as a parent to keep on top.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you a few kind of quick questions.
Sure.
Given what you know right now and your experience, what advice would you give to a 20-year-old self?
Definitely, I think go take that road less traveled. That's what I did. Remember when my boss stepped on the office chair and he said, you can go there, and I put my money on it. So I would do it again, even if it's sometimes the harder one. And I think the second thing is also it might take years and decades that made sense. And maybe it doesn't make sense, right? So I studied Japanese and I learned all of my kanjis and whatever. And then I'm in the automotive industry in Michigan. And then I'm getting a call from a headhunter to come back to Japan 13 years later. So sometimes you do something and it makes sense and you're having fun, and then not everything that you have in your toolbox needs to come together, but sometimes it just takes a long loop. So I would definitely do this. And the other thing, coming back also to our T-Bird network, I think is what I said earlier, it's here for you to take. So no one is going to bring it after you. No one is kind of like carrying the books for your daughter or whatever. I mean, she would need to find it out. But the investment in the relationships, I mean, we've been to weddings and unfortunately funerals and other things with T-Bird friends. But it's the investment that you put in it. But it's so much more than whatever content we learned. The content in a couple of years will be obsolete. But I think definitely that early investment in the network and the friendships and stuff definitely is worthwhile, which you don't see at that moment so much.
Yeah, great.
Definitely would do that again.
That's true. And you travel the whole world. What's your next travel destination?
Not that far. Our youngest is doing an internship right now at the Ritz-Carlton in Barcelona, and we brought him down, and now we need to pick him up again. And I thought, okay, I will volunteer. We are driving down to Spain, which is not that far from here.
How long of a drive is it?
It's about 8 hours. So we just stop in the south of France, take a little press, and then next morning continue. Not that far. For American standards, it's easy.
Yeah, it's like going to San Diego for me.
That's it.
All right. No, that's great. Andreas, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
Thanks
I learned
for
a
having
lot.
me.
Very informative. Thank you for sharing all your experiences and advice for students. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the initiative. I think I'm very jealous because if you do this right, speaking to or having coffee with T-Birds, you will just learn so much and be exposed to so many great stories.
I'm learning for everyone.
To help along the way.
I'm learning for everyone who's listening. So that's and thank you for supporting it. So appreciate it.
Very cool. Thanks for having me, and best of luck for the next episodes.
Yeah, and best of luck with your book.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Cheers.